To the best of our knowledge, human trafficking is buying and purchasing human beings for sex or other benefits, whether that be labor, sex, or other benefits for the buyer or the pimp in settings such as sex trafficking. Through talking to survivors, representatives, Human Coalition, police officers, people such as bankers, strippers, establishment owners, we start to reveal just how real human trafficking is in our own backyard.
Missouri is one of 7 states in the United States of America, seven states in the United States of America that makes prostitution a felony.
Trafficking's become even bigger and bigger, especially here in the KC metro area. The outcry for help actually seems to be getting larger by the year.
I feel it doesn't get talked about enough. I feel the legalized sex industry doesn't get talked about enough. I was sold to the owner of a strip club. That is a person legally owning an establishment, purchasing a human being. It's a trafficker.
I think the biggest thing that you have to look at is the fact that the financial gain, anytime that you're going to have a profit and it's based upon monies, you know.
Why do they do it? Why are they trafficked? A lot of the young ladies or men have low self-esteem. They're either runaways or for some reason they don't feel loved. So a lot of the traffickers, the handlers, will either meet them somewhere, say you're a waitress at a restaurant, they would be your customer, or they could be any acquaintance, and they express a love and a concern and act like they really care. And they kind of set the hook, reel you in. And then, after that person, well, if you really loved me, you would do this.
Those women, those my friends, those human beings, they literally got into tricks cars, purchasers of sex, and were murdered. Not by the hands of the traffickers, but by the men purchasing sex.
Outcry for help actually seems to be getting larger by the year. We kind of got into the business with working with an AIDS and HIV organization, meeting more and more young women that become infected with AIDS and HIV. So it's kind of one of the things where you kind of start hearing the outcry of those girls wanting to tell their story but were afraid to. And then as I see these women and spoke to these women on a regular basis, and the more compassion you gave them, it seemed like they opened up more, and you kind of got to hear the story of how they got into the human trafficking industry.
Brutally raped over and over again, locked in a closet, and then branded, literally branded, like a piece of cattle. And I wasn't allowed food or water, and I was locked in a very dark room with no windows, and it was just a very, very traumatic, horrific time in my life, right?
People seem to think it's not a big epidemic, but it is, because it's done by uncles, mothers and fathers, family members. And it just seems like between law enforcement and everything else, there's just not enough resources, enough help to be done.
I found myself struggling when I left the streets. I was dealing with the stigma behind the word prostitution because I was what we call a pre-movement survivor. Pre-movement survivor is kind of a term I coined for women that had exited before we decided that we were going to talk about trafficking being an issue. They call it a modern day slavery, but it's been going on since the beginning of time, so it's very inaccurate.
They're dealing with individuals that either traffic young ladies or contract with handlers or pimps or whatever to traffic the ladies for them. So I think the causes are agreed on the part of the top people in the organization. Usually in trafficking you're dealing with young individuals or people that want to send money home, and they're taking advantage of it.
Younger kids, juveniles, females, but then also you have to look at the increase of the number of males that have actually been, put into white slavery as well.
First of all, the average age, as I said, is 12 in trafficking. And that's average, so you know a lot of them are younger. And most of the sex trafficking, they want it to be younger individuals because that's more attractive to some people.
Because when you see young ladies, you look at Columbia the other day, a 14-year-old girl lost her life in a hotel on heroin. How can a 14-year-old young lady go into an environment, purchase a hotel even, get in there, who else was with her, and was left to die? So, is it that a victim? What would that lead into? And the fact of it is that she was a young lady and somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, and it's out there.
Young women, and actually young boys at times, but the women we predominantly see, mostly here in Kansas City metro area, has actually been predominantly Hispanic and Asians.
And it has to do because of their cultures. And he talks about how in the Hispanic culture, family's huge. So they'll take these women and then tell them that they'll kill their family if they don't do what they tell them to do. And he gave an example of there was a farm in Florida where he said they were driving down a county road and a guy stopped them, and he was like, "What are you doing here?" And they were like, "Oh, we have a right to be here, it's just a county road." And turns out what was happening on this nearby farm, there was a Hispanic owner who was bringing in these men to come work on his farm. It was a tomato farm. And while they were working on it, what they were being paid, they would pay back like a third of it to housing, a third of it to food, and the rest of it they would end up spending on these women.
Tomato fields, the corn fields, the cotton fields. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times you'll have young individuals or people that are brought over, and they will then live in horrible environment and they can't seem to get back home.
So really and truly, the owner was getting free labor out of the workers and then using the women as a way to keep retaining that money so he wasn't having to pay them. And they would only let Hispanics into the area.
People who are always going to take advantage of other people. And I think that people take advantage of some of the weakest members of our society.
It's not just people who are vulnerable. There is high motivation and drive for traffickers because of the money to find any and every way to prey on people.
Brazil, the Super Bowl, the World Cup basically is coming this summer in Brazil. And the big thing about that is, with any world event like that, just like the Olympics, human trafficking heightens. Anywhere that there is a demand, that many sports fans, the country is not as aware of the comings and goings, the security behind things and different things like that, and the demand. There's a demand for sex, and so it's really an economic, thing. It's about people are willing to purchase sex, so they need to supply the goods or services to be able to fulfill that need.
When you start dealing with the perversion, and the young lady stated tonight, the majority of the people who she was coming in contact with and that were soliciting her were adult men, businessmen, who wanted sexual acts performed, but then they became violent.
Drugs can only be used once.
Yeah.
You smoke a joint, you do the cocaine, you can't get it back. But in the environment of human trafficking, that girl or guy, young boy, could be used over and over and over again.
Earlier this week, we got to interview the survivor, Christine, again. On a more personal level, she took us to her church in St. Louis, and we were able to sit down with her and talk with her on a really intimate level.
My job was to go in and ask, would you like to buy a flower? That's what I did. Would you like to buy the lady a flower? That was my job. And when I was done, I'd give him the money, and he was buying me clothes and makeup, and of course I had a room. And a few weeks into this, he came, and he's like, "Oh, I got something for you." And he handed me an envelope. I opened it up, and it was a fake ID. It had the age I had given him. It had the name I had given him. It had my picture on it. And then he woke me up one morning and said, "Hey, Tress, we're gonna go to lunch." And we did. We went to lunch. We went to Western Sizzler. And he introduced me to a gentleman that joined us as his brother. And for $2,500, he sold me to the owner of a strip club.
It's really eye-opening because we, as a city or even as a society, this stuff is happening every day. And right before our eyes, that's the crazy part. It's happening right before our eyes, and they are very good at what they do.
Recently, we just met with Clint from Lost Souls, and he took us out for, to see the reality of what's happening on the streets in Independence Avenue, Flying J on Front Street, and we saw a lot of brutal stuff.
He made aware to us quite a few prostitutes on the street. Something that Clint was mentioning is that we do not give the people in the ghetto or that type of area enough credit.
That was a 9mm charging.
Oh, there's...
Yep, there she is. Look, see? She's yelling. Look.
Yeah, yelling at him.
She's gone. Oh, nope, there she
Look,
is.
she's still there.
Told you, look.
So these two guys standing around her, do you think they're her pimps?
Yeah. One of them's got something to do with her.
We got a prostitute right here.
One of these guys got a stronghold.
Quite a few people, pimps that are posted up and are using two-way radios to call in when cops are anywhere near. When the cops were nearby, they would be off the radar. But then as soon as the cops would not be in the area, they would start coming out. The girls would start sitting on the corners, and we started seeing pimps or what have you, men, buyers, coming and purchasing sex.
We've had situations where we've become aware of it looked like truck stop type trafficking when there was unusual cash activity coming into an account. You look into it and find out it's at a truck stop.
I mean, this is really organized. They were all working together. There was one, was it a Buick, driving up and down. He was the guy in charge. And, I mean, you could tell he was checking on every girl on the corners. I mean, he had probably, 4 or 5 girls out there. So, I mean, it was really interesting to watch how organized they are. It is a really carefully put together business.
Lights are on. He's checking all of his markers. That's a black dude that time. The other dude was white.
Yeah.
There was money, transactions that were being taken place apart from the actual solicitation of sex. And they do that because, as Clint, the person that was chauffeuring us around for protection down there, was showing that it's so hard to catch them because they never do the two at the same time. They do one at a totally different time and area, and then the solicitation is actually taking place somewhere else. So the ability that they were able to take that and the sleight of hand. I physically watched a man 15 feet in front of me, and I almost missed it. Like, the sleight of hand between him and interacting with someone in the car as he was handing over drugs, it was so slight that I barely caught it.
You're supposed to sit there with your lights on, dumbass. And that sometimes could be something too.
Just sitting there with the lights on.
Yep.
Human trafficking can be in our own backyard. And so I think as citizens, what we need to do is just to be conscious of the fact that there is human trafficking, and to be willing to look at other people who normally we may not look at. Your hotel maid, or workers in the kitchen at a restaurant, or a young girl with a much older man who is at a bus station, and you're kind of wondering what's going on. Something doesn't seem right.
A couple days ago, we got to, I don't know if we want to say got, but we went into a strip club off I-70, and it was very eye-opening, to say the least.
We were expecting maybe like, can I see your IDs, anything like that, but she, first question she asked is if we had CDLs, which are trucker licenses, and we said no, and she was like, do you have military license, or military IDs, and just went ahead and said no, and then she was just like, well, what do you want? I mean, it wasn't, she didn't like go to, can I see your driver's license or anything like that. It was just, what are you doing here kind of thing. And so we told them we were making a documentary on strip clubs, and we got to interview the girls after a little bit, but there were conditions set up to where we had to point the camera away from the girls. It was strictly audio, so we have a shot of just the stage and then their voices.
It's just like any other job, it really doesn't matter about the fact that we explode to do our job.
Do you know anyone that has been a victim of human trafficking in the time that you guys have been in this business? No. As we continued talking, we started asking them, how did you get into this, and what keeps you here, and stuff like that. And then I asked for their names, just like general. Can you just give me a general name? And two of them piped up immediately and said, oh, well, we're TMJs. And they pulled up their wrists, and they had initials branded into their wrist, which we had previously talked to a survivor, which said that was one of the tall tale signs of human trafficking.
Picked up by a trick and held captive for a very, very long number of days, where I had been brutally raped over and over again, locked in a closet, and then branded, literally branded, like a piece of cattle.
Basically, what protects us with that is that we get the rules up front. There's no licking, kissing, sucking, or biting anywhere in the building. There's no sexual favors that take place anywhere, inside or outside. If that's what they're looking for, they're quick to be told to go elsewhere, because none of us are willing to compromise ourselves in that manner.
And so, in the moment, we weren't processing that very well. We were listening to what they were telling us, but it was it was a big flag.
It's a form of self-expression, in my opinion. As a parent, you always want better for your kids than what you've had yourself.
We started talking to them about why they stay in it, what keeps them there, and at first they were saying it was a way of expressing themselves, but then as we got a little deeper, they started talking about
how they didn't make very much money, and then when they did make money, most of it went to the owner of the club, and they still didn't get to keep very much of it.
And then scrolling over, right there at the corner is the bondage room, and now you're crossing over into the bed dance area. That's probably the most common area in the building.
The bed dance?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a particular reason for that?
Probably pricing, and time-wise.
Oh, is it like cheaper?
It's less expensive than the hot tub and the bondage room.
we didn't know what to think. We were still connected to the story and them as a person and what they had been telling us, and how impactful and real it sounded. But then as we kept driving, it wasn't making sense. Their story about their family and their story about who they were and why they came to do it, and seeing the branding and the financial situation, none of it was clicking. And so we just going through that and then realizing that they all had that brand on, we came to the realization that we might have in fact been standing in the presence of women that were human trafficked.
In advertising, in rap music, in movies, and videos, and all kinds of ways, the level of tolerating the objectification of people, and in particular girls and women, has become more and more pervasive.
You know, a lot of media does it, you know, the movie Taken, different things like that. People were more aware of it because of things like that. But really just going down deep into, you know, it's in America, it's in Kansas City, it's all over, you know, it's in your backyard, it's in the really nice neighborhoods, in the mansions, you know, it's happening everywhere.
I think when you look at it overall, society bases upon social economic background. We seen tonight that it can go from anybody. Let's go from the movie Taken. You know, just as an example, good family, father, whatever else, but she became a victim. But like the young lady stated, she was in a poor environment. The majority of incidents happened with her own household that forced her out into the community in which she didn't know anybody because she was in a rural area. She came to the big city, and then what happened? Unaware to her, she became a victim.
Victims of human trafficking are often seen as criminals once they're caught.
The demand side of the industry really drives the industry. And so by hitting on the demand side, the Johns.
A John is a person who buys sex. Buys sex is a John.
Or the people who are using the forced labor and getting the benefit from that, but they're not essentially the trafficker. They're obtaining those people.
The recruiters, people who are transporting, the people who are actually buying sex from people. Those are all involved in this being a criminal trade.
They are given no support. Their ability to have food stamps and their ability to have any way of coping after the fact is non-existent.
When I faced barriers trying to put my life back together with a criminal history, with an addiction, a newfound disability, I was unable to find work, I was unable to tap into normal services. So, and I had very limited education. I decided that, you know what, the system's broken and the system is not set up to help people.
One of the barriers is how they are uniquely without any funds. You know, they don't have the same kind of level of proof that someone might have because they've come out of being trafficked by.
Because victims come out of the situation with literally really less than nothing. I mean, they may come out not only without shelter, clothing, food, they may have medical issues now because of their situation. They may not have any of their identification. There could be a lot of things that they come out of these situations with. So they need some immediate assistance.
Saying, you know, we have a person who is a victim of trafficking and has nowhere to live.
Why don't people go to churches? Why don't people go to the police department? But you got to understand, like that young lady stated tonight who was a victim, she stated that fear, some of the things and incidents that were happening within her own residence, a lot of times we don't realize it, that's where it starts.
Clothing, food, medical help, and those are all things that a lot of times the government can't provide or individual agencies can't provide. The FBI doesn't have a place for victims to go stay, but the NGOs will work with us to determine what needs the victim has and where to get those needs met.
People are fascinated with human trafficking. It has this kind of underworld allure to it. I think human trafficking is a problem that gets probably more attention, not more attention than it needs, but a lot of other problems are not getting attention that should be, whether it's education or illiteracy or poverty, all of which can be part of the human trafficking problem.
Human trafficking, it's like this social injustice. It's like a buzzword. It's going everywhere.
Our office started a human trafficking rescue project where we have two arms of it. We have the law enforcement arm where we work with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, and then we also we have over 60 NGOs, non-governmental organizations, who work with us to help provide services that a victim may need, or victims may need once they're removed from a trafficking situation.
And when I realized that it was local as well as international, I was one of those people that thought, this happens internationally and they bring them in, but it can happen in our own backyard. And so I think we really need to make sure that everybody understands what human trafficking is and that it can happen to your best friend.
But if we begin to open up our vision and see them as human beings, greet them, make eye-to-eye contact, say hello to them.
Passing that on to somebody else, sharing it with a friend or whatever, I think that's a positive sign and that's a start.
Host a speaker or host a documentary, or have a book read using one of the books written by a survivor.
Nurses can contribute and help girls who've come out of human trafficking. Lawyers, like social workers, therapists, business people, administrative people, development people, really film people. Every type of degree can work in human trafficking and contribute.
The tide of public opinion can really turn and shine a light on something.
You have to look at reporting incidents that may happen. You don't have to actually give your name or anything else, but I think it's a big start.
Working with ex-military law enforcement guys, it seems like a group of guys that are fighting for one thing, but kind of running from the demons of their past, but making good by it. And I think that's what makes what our team does is going to the extreme of stopping what we can on our end.
It might just be a mom and a child that just didn't get along for the day. But if you report it, you might have saved one person's life. You may be the tip of the iceberg that they're waiting for.
The humanity of every person, the dignity of every person, in every aspect of our lives, that can go a long way in prevention.
Finding out the truth is never easy or cheap. Spencer and I were very blessed to come through unscathed physically. However, mentally and emotionally, we did not. How can we just sit here and do nothing? The answer is no, we can't.